It is opening day, White Sox fans. Up at American Family Field in Milwaukee, the White Sox 2026 season gets started today. Welcome to our opening day edition of Believe in White Sox. I'm Greg Miraz. It is an early morning here on the south side of Chicago, but I am fired up. I am ready to go. I want to talk about this roster. I want to talk about today's starting lineup, which Will Venable released yesterday. I want to talk about what to expect from this team early on in the season. And I want to go through what this rotation is, why it was set up this way, and what I expect from who is and who hopefully at some point will also be a part of the rotation. I'm talking about Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz. So before we do anything else, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Pod, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. There is a lot of platforms. Also, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel where all this stuff gets uploaded. I am hopeful that I'm going to have enough time to make the YouTube channel a little bit better than what it's been. So my apologies for that because I just, quite frankly, don't have the time. But the White Sox opening day roster is set, and I want to talk about who's not on it before I talk about who is on it. And injuries necessitated two moves, and that is putting Brooks Baldwin and Kyle Teel on the 10-day injured list. Brooks Baldwin's right elbow, it got hurt during spring training, and he's not ready to go yet. Kyle Teel, the hamstring strain during the World Baseball Classic, so he's not ready to go yet. But a couple of things that happened over the last few days that surprised me, and the fact that the White Sox decided to go out and sign Reese McGuire, who was with the White Sox a couple of years ago, to be their backup catcher in the short term and gave him a one-year major league guaranteed contract, was an interesting move to me because you already had Corey Lee as a younger bat, a cheaper bat, somebody that's a little bit more controllable, although he's running out of options, and quite frankly, he ran out of time because he had what one might say was enough time to establish himself, but there's clearly no more room for him, and that's why the White Sox designated him for assignment. Now, there's a good chance that he clears waivers and is outrighted to AAA Charlotte and can be brought onto the 40-man roster at some point in the near future, and you can keep him in the organization, but it pretty much appears to me that Corey Lee's days in the White Sox organization are done. But what the signing of Reese McGuire to me says is that the White Sox are going to be willing to do more things with Kyle Teel once he's back. And it's an interesting roster construction to start the year because another DFA for the White Sox was they DFA'd Curtis Mead, who is somebody that could play all over the infield. Now, there are guys that can probably do Mead's job a little bit better than Mead, meaning Luis Angel Acuna is the guy that I think he's going to end up being primarily in the outfield, but he's somebody that also could have played the infield. And I'm somewhat surprised that the White Sox chose to go with two other pure outfielders in Everson Pereira and Derek Hill. Actually, the White Sox ended up going with three pure outfielders in addition to Luis Angel Acuna with Derek Hill, Everson Pereira, and Tristan Peters, as opposed to having one of those guys not be on the roster and utilizing Curtis Mead. So that is an interesting move and one that I don't know if that's the right move because I'd want somebody like Mead that can play all over the diamond without having to bring Acuna into the infield if he truly is what you hope he's going to be, and that's your everyday center fielder. But if he does stay in the outfield most of the time, then what your infield is going to be most days is pretty much set. And that infield is going to be Miguel Vargas at third, Colson Montgomery at short, Chase Meideroth at second, Munetaka Murakami at first, and Lenyn Sosa is going to play some first. He's going to play some second, probably going to play some third, and then also going to DH a little bit. And I think that based on the way that the White Sox wanted to construct their outfield and wanted to give more outfielders a chance to prove themselves as options to be on this team beyond this year, I think that they wanted Sosa to fill the Mead role because he has more power. He's not nearly as good defensively, but he's somebody that you've got to find a place for his bat. And that place is maybe taking a little bit of defense away when he is out there, as opposed to having him play primarily one position and having Curtis Mead as the utility guy that won't provide nearly the kind of power that Lenyn Sosa will. So that's my take on the roster construction in terms of the position players. Now, in terms of the pitchers, your rotation is set. And in this order, it's going to be Shane Smith, Sean Burke, Anthony Kay, Davis Martin, and Eric Fetty. Now, we knew when they signed Eric Fetty that he was going to end up being one part of this rotation. Now, one bit of news that we did not get to that I think is really relevant is that Mike Vassell was vying for a spot in this rotation. And Mike Vassell, when we last talked, exited his start with right elbow soreness. And what we did not know at the time, and what happened in the days following our last episode, is that it was determined that Mike Vassell needed Tommy John surgery. So one of the best arms of last year's White Sox team is done for the year and probably done for the first part of next year. So losing Mike Vassell, who I think would have ended up taking that fifth rotation spot, hurts. But at the same time, it opens up an opportunity for Sean Burke to stay on this roster. And it quite frankly opened up an opportunity for Yedixon Paez, who was one of your Rule 5 picks, to make the opening day roster in the bullpen. So your bullpen consists of, in no particular role order, Chris Murphy, Sean Newcomb, Yedixon Paez, Grant Taylor, Jordan Leisure, Jordan Hicks, Tyler Gilbert, and Sir Anthony Dominguez, with Dominguez being the closer, Jordan Hicks probably the setup guy, and then your main middle relievers being Sean Newcomb, Grant Taylor, and Chris Murphy. Now, Jordan Leisure still has a role on this team, but it's not going to be nearly as high a leverage of a role as he was last year. So I'm really interested to see how Will Venable ends up constructing his quote-unquote bullpen ladder. Who are we going to see with leads in the seventh? Who are we going to see with short deficits in the sixth? Who's going to be that first guy out of the pen? Who's somebody that you're more than likely going to see in blowout situations? I'm really high on what this bullpen can be. I still think that Yedixon Paez, I think I'm saying his name correctly, so if I'm not, please somebody tweet at me. Just do it in a nice way. I'm not sure what kind of role he's going to have. He's less developed as a Rule 5 guy than Shane Smith was last year. So I'm not sure what his overall role is going to be. But if Jordan Leisure can live up to his potential, get a little bit more movement on his fastball, and develop his breaking stuff more, this has the makings of a good bullpen. Now, does Jordan Hicks still have it? He wasn't great during spring training. So I don't know if Jordan Hicks still has it. There's part of me that feels like he doesn't. But at the same time, I want to be optimistic that he still has a little bit left. And his spring training numbers this year were in 9 appearances. He had a 3.72 ERA, 4 earned runs in 9 2/3 innings, 5 walks, and 10 strikeouts. So good, but not great. Chris Murphy was really good out of the pen during spring training. Sean Newcomb was terrible during spring training, especially with the home runs allowed. He gave up 4 homers in 14 innings, 20 total hits in 14 spring training innings, but you signed him to a guaranteed deal, so he's going to be there. Shane Smith was really bad in spring training too, and I hope it's not a sign of things to come. I was surprised that the White Sox let go of Ryan Barucki, especially considering that he not only signed with the San Francisco Giants, but he ended up making their opening day roster. I would have taken him over Tyler Gilbert, and granted, small sample sizes in their spring trainings. Jordan Leisure had a great spring training, which is why I think he's on this team. And, Yedixon Paez was not great, but I think the potential is there, and the White Sox want to just be able to stash his arm and hope that he's part of the future. So it's an interesting lineup to begin opening day, and this is what the lineup's going to be. It's going to be Maedroth leading off, playing second, Montgomery at short, batting second, Vargas hitting third, playing third, Andrew Benintendi DHs and cleans up, Austin Hayes in left field, batting fifth, Munetaka Murakami bats sixth at first base. I think people thought that he'd be a little bit higher in the lineup, but I think the strikeout issues are to the point where he is going to be batting lower in the lineup until it can be proven that he won't strike out as much as he seemingly did during his spring training stint with the White Sox. I mean, you look at the sample of what he did during spring training, and he struck out 8 times in 29 spring training bats over 9 spring training games. Now, he was with Japan in the WBC, but against spring training pitching, if you're striking out over 25% of the time, that's concerning and probably a reason why, granted, even a small sample, but we've talked about it in the past how his strikeout rate is less than ideal for what you are hoping for from somebody that's going to be an everyday player and hopefully hit third or fourth in the lineup. But again, he got signed at his AAV because he has those strikeout issues. If he didn't have those strikeout issues, he's not a member of the White Sox. He's playing for the Mets or the Dodgers or the Cubs or the Red Sox or the Yankees or the Blue Jays or somebody that's going to be able to pay a little bit more money than the White Sox would. So he will be an interesting person to follow all year in terms of where he sits in the lineup. But finishing out the starting lineup, you have Everson Perea in right field, batting seventh. Edgar Caro does the catching. He hits eighth. And Luis Angel Acuna in center field, batting ninth. Everson Perea, to me, is somebody I was very excited for when they traded for him. He did not have a lot of spring training at bats, but the White Sox have enough faith in him to where he's going to end up being one of the guys that will play in right field. You'll see some of Tristan Peters. I think that you'll see Austin Hayes play a little bit out there. Derek Hill's going to play out there. This White Sox outfield is going to be a lot of moving parts. I don't think that we're going to see a consistent outfield, but if this opening day lineup is any indication, they are going to DH Andrew Benintendi as much as humanly possible, which means that the at-bats that you would think would be meant for Lenyn Sosa are not going to be as frequent, at least to start off. But then I also look at when Kyle Teal comes back, how does this lineup change? How does this roster construction change? Does Kyle Teal get more of those DH at bats? Does he get to play the outfield more? What happens with the catching situation now that you've signed somebody to be a 1-year guaranteed backup? I would like to think that if you're going to sign Reese McGuire to a 1-year deal, that he's not going to necessarily be quote unquote for the long term, but you'll sacrifice the money that you have to pay him when you release him. And granted, it's not that much money, but any bit of money that you have to pay to somebody that's not playing for you is a lot of money for Jerry Reinsdorf. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Like, that's how the White Sox operate. But at the end of the day, this opening day roster is a set infield, a mix of veteran and young guys in the rotation with all having to prove themselves, and an outfield that we just have no idea. We have no idea outside of Austin Hayes what this outfield is going to be. And that's assuming that Andrew Benintendi does not play much in the outfield. We don't know what this outfield's going to be. And I worry that this outfield is going to end up being a negative from game to game, week to week, in terms of the impact the lineup, or rather the impact that those players have on the lineup. Like, that could be a giant hole in this lineup. But it all depends upon evaluation through the first month, 6 weeks of the year, and figuring out what's your go-to outfield, and are there moves that can be made that will improve this outfield in the short term and the long term. And to me, that is the eventual call-up of Braden Montgomery. But the White Sox are not going to waste his service time or start his service time clock before they need to if they're not in a position to compete. Now, Derek Hill, to me, I talked about it when they signed him. This is somebody that he was at one point in time a top prospect, a first-round pick. He had a good spring training, and he had every opportunity to play in spring training. He had 45 at-bats in 17 games. Derek, you're going to see a lot of Derek Hill this year. Will he be impactful? Probably not. The key is, can he be serviceable? And I'm hoping that every outfielder that is on this roster is serviceable. I had hoped that Jared Kelenic would make this team, but he just, quite frankly, did not play well enough. He didn't play well enough. He hit 179 in 14 spring training games. If you can't make the White Sox after being shipped off by the Mariners and cast away by the Braves, if you can't make the White Sox, then I really don't know what to say. And I hope that the way that Chris Getz and Will Venable have chosen to construct this outfield will prove to develop some guys that could be here for a while. And the guys that I look at in that regard are the Everson Perez and the Tristan Peters. Those are the guys that you think could develop roles for now and for the future. Everybody else in the outfield, I don't know what to think of Luis Angel Acuna. Maybe he turns into what everybody thought his potential could be. Austin Hayes, this is a short-term deal, and somebody that if he plays well and the White Sox aren't in it, they're flipping him at the deadline for somebody else. And Andrew Benintendi, who knows what you're going to get out of him at this point. But what I hope happens is that somebody sees the value in him and wants to trade for him. Or maybe the White Sox are good enough to where he's a valuable piece on a team that's competing for a playoff spot. I don't think that's going to happen. But again, optimism is our biggest friend as opening day is finally here. So now, as we close out this episode, I'm going to make some predictions for the season. And these predictions are based on gut feeling. They're based on how I think this team is going to develop, and basically how I'm hoping the season is going to end up going. So, my wins total prediction is going to be 73. I think the White Sox go 73 and 89. That is another significant win improvement from last year to this year. And I think that you finally start to find a stable core that is turning themselves not into just the green shoots of what could be, but into guys that are going to be major impact players. I think that you are going to have 3 different players hit at least 20 home runs this year. Those players are going to be Colson Montgomery, Andrew Benintendi, and Munetaka Murakami. I would want to say Miguel Vargas, but I think he's going to come up just a little bit short. I think that the White Sox pitching staff will end up in the top half of the league in ERA, that is of MLB. And just to give you a little bit of perspective in terms of what you're trying to go off of from last year, the White Sox last year finished 20th in ERA at 4.26. I think the White Sox team batting average is in the top 20. And I say top 20 because last year they were fourth to last with a team average of 232. I think that they are 20th at worst in terms of team batting average. I think the player that's not yet on this roster that makes the biggest impact is going to be Braden Montgomery. I think that he will perform too well down in the minors for them to keep him away for too long. I think the first pitching prospect that ends up making his way to the big leagues is going to end up being Noah Schultz. I don't think that's a difficult prediction. And I think that the first infield prospect that makes his way to the big leagues that we haven't seen yet is going to be Sam Antonacci, because we've already seen how good he can be. And I think that this White Sox team is going to be within 3 games of a wild card spot by the All-Star break. Now, you're probably saying, now wait a minute, Greg, you said they're going to finish 73 and 89. Well, I think that there's going to be some running out of gas, but I think that this team is going to be competitive for the first 3.5 months of the year. And then I think when the rubber hits the road, they're going to face the inexperience of not having been in this position before. And there will be some faltering. Is that a negative outlook? Yes. But at the same time, be realistic about what this team is at this point. There could be some regression. I think you're going to see regression from Chase Mydroth because I think people are going to know how to pitch him better. And I think you're going to end up seeing some regression from Edgar Caro as well. But I hope not. This is what I think, not what I know. And the best season for somebody that is new to the organization, I think you are going to have an absolutely monster year from Austin Hayes. It's an easy cop-out prediction, but I think you're going to have a monster year from him to the point where he's your best or second best hitter through the first 2.5 months of the year. And if you are realistically out of playoff contention by the last week of July, you will get a great return for him. And the money you spent on him, which was not much in the first place, will have been well worth it. As for our plan for recapping shows this year, recapping games this year, we're not going to do necessarily game recaps unless they feel warranted, as much as we're going to do series recaps, where we take every series holistically and evaluate what went right, what went wrong, and what it is that the White Sox have done that makes us feel good about where this team is heading overall. But we had a long season ahead of us. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. And even if the White Sox don't win more games than they lose, which means a losing record, this is the year where you feel like steps will be taken for this team to be on the up come next year, assuming there is a next year. And because of that, because of the uncertainty in regards to the labor situation, let's enjoy this year. Let's enjoy everything that the White Sox are going to give us this year. The good, the bad, the ugly. You know, I didn't even bring up the Frank Thomas suing the White Sox because I don't think that storyline is good for White Sox fans to talk about because it's just Frank Thomas having an axe to grind because Frank Thomas always has an axe to grind. Focus on what's on the field. If there's something that's off the field that's really relevant to what's going on the field, then you know what? Fine, whatever. We have run the gamut on what this organization has done poorly off the field. Everybody knows it. People that are diehard fans of this team know it. I know it. My dad knows it. My dad, who's been a White Sox fan his entire life, will be 70 years old next March. Understand what this team is and what this organization is. And when Justin Ishbia comes in and there's an infusion of capital and you have homegrown talent that is leading this team to playoff appearances, you are going to have the resources and the turbo to get you over the hump. But for now, let's enjoy what we have in the present. This has been Believe in White Sox. Happy opening day, everybody. And if you make it up to Milwaukee, I hope you have a great time. Let's go, White Sox.